Hey everyone. Status this morning went a little bit broader than I had expected, and honestly, I've been thinking about making the video sort of telling about my journey from Stonebriar on. Um, I just have never really felt peace about it until kind of at this moment, and I realized, I'm moving from Dallas to Nashville. A lot of it is because of the Stonebriar situation. It was time to move on to get a fresh start, and I think part of moving on is a closure. And one thing I never really got from the whole Stonebriar situation is closure. So please know my heart that I I love the people of Stonebriar, and I think that the message of grace is a very important message. And I think what is said about grace is absolutely right, and the power of the gospel is wrapped up in the message of grace. So here's what happened. A year and a half ago in January, we were having a Saturday choir clinic. I think a lot of you who are in the choir will remember. It was a normal day. I was in there, had to do my bass sectionals, get up. Here's how you sing a vowel. Here's how you don't sing a vowel. And then after the rehearsal, I was asked into a meeting, and I got back into the meeting, and there were four people around the table, and I sat down, and my boss slid couple pieces of paper over to me, and he said, "Did you write this? Is this you?" And I looked down, and it was some copies of some tweets. And I looked at it and read through. I said, "Yeah, this is me." And they said, "Well, I just can't believe that you would write this." And I said, "Read it again." So I read through them, and I said, "Yeah, this is me. I'm a little bit confused." And I said, "Well, from this moment on, you are no longer officially employed at Stonebriar." And of course, my heart just stopped, because Stonebriar, like, it was the dream job. I got to work with like the top talent. I was writing for some of the best players around. Um, and so I said, I don't understand what's going on. And so looking through the tweets, it was I'll give you a little bit of history on Twitter. My job at Stonebriar, I had to recruit a lot of musicians, and I loved my musicians. My musicians were from varied backgrounds, politically, religiously, uh, which was fine. And so when I'm a political junkie, love talking about politics, but I realized that politics can be a very divisive topic, and so I couldn't talk about it openly on Facebook because it just didn't promote unity, and I represented the church on Facebook. And so I decided to start a Twitter account, and I was completely anonymous, not because I was trying to do anything nefarious, but I just wanted an area where I could talk politics and not have it affect my job. In fact, my bio on Twitter said, "I love Christ, food, and beagles." And I said the latter makes serving the former difficult at some times. I think that was what my comment said. Well, as it was explained to me at the meeting when they said you are no longer employed here, someone, I guess a kid, had somehow come across my Twitter, found a tweet, told their mom. The mom emailed in anonymously. From what I understand, it was sent from anonymousparent@gmail.com or something like that, and said, "We love Paul Thompson. He probably doesn't understand that some people may not understand what he writes. Could you deal with this privately?" And rather than deal with it privately, they instructed the IT department to go through my entire Twitter history and write down everything that was questionable. So, um, on one end of the spectrum, one of the tweets that they had listed, I said the word muffin top. That was on there. So that was, I guess, bad. On the worst side of things, I think probably the worst thing I tweeted was, and if there are kids listening, just know that this is not something that I would ever say around kids. I try to use my words very appropriately, but someone had posted an article by a fashion designer during the whole Trump thing and said he thought that all conservative men should be penetrated by a gay person or something. Well, the guy that I was having a conversation with, our background, our friendship was largely based on action movies and action stars. And so I tweeted back to him a quote from a movie, and I had it in quotes, and I listed the movie and everything. That was just sort of how it went. Anyway, so there were no curse words. I wasn't cursing. I wasn't trying to demean the name of Christ. I tried to live my private life and my public life very similarly. I don't think that position should dictate how you act as a Christian. Be the same in the dark as you are in the light. Well, mostly. we try. So anyway, I sat at the table, and we went around, they went around the table, and each one got to sort of point a finger at me. One person said, "You have a very dark heart. You need professional counseling." And I kind of laughed, and I said, "No, of course I need professional counseling, but not about this. Like, I don't understand. This is not, I don't see how this is that bad to be fired over it. Up until this point, all of my job reviews had been 100. I was unsure of where this was coming from. And so I said, listen, if you will give me a chance, I said, I am sorry. I did not know that what I was saying was this bad. And I said, if you will give me a chance, I will close my Twitter. I will close my Facebook. I will make friends in the real world. Let me earn your trust back. And they said no. And so I asked my boss, will I have a chance to face my accuser on this? And he said, no, we are your accuser. You're gone. You're fired. So I was told to come back that next Monday after closing to clear out my office. I was escorted by 3 people to make sure, I was escorted by 3 people, cleaned it out. I was heartbroken. I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. I just bought a house. What do you do? But humility is not easy. It's never easy, but I think that it's important for Christians to do. And so I sent in an email and just said, listen, I'm very sorry for what I did. I honestly did not know that it was this level of bad. If I did, I wouldn't have done it. Again, all I can say is I'm sorry. I wrote an apology to the parent whose child had seen the tweet and said, if you could pass this along, just know that I take children's safety and their innocence very seriously. That is something I don't mess around with. I have a lot of nieces and nephews and grand nieces and nephews. And so, I would probably be in a murderous rage if anyone ever harmed them. And I extend that protection to kids that I'm around. So it was not my intention. I was on Twitter. I was in a private conversation. Someone happened to overhear it. Anyway, I'm sorry. Well, the announcement was made to the choir and then via email a little bit later to the orchestra, and it was announced that I had been fired for a severe moral indiscretion on social media. And instantly people started writing in, and someone said, were you inappropriate with a child? Someone else, what did you do? Like, what was happening? Did you molest a child? What's going on? I said, oh, dear God, no. And so I wrote in another email and I said, listen, again, I am sorry for what I did, but could we tone down this rhetoric? People are thinking that I did something horrible to a child, and that's not what it was. I finally got a response from the executive pastor and met with him, and I said, listen, again, I'm sorry for what I did, but you've got to understand that in this day and age, to say something like a severe indiscretion or a severe moral indiscretion makes it sound like I'm a molester or a rapist or, something like that. And what he told me was, well, when we fire people at Stonebriar, if they're fired for sexual indiscretion, then we will say you've been fired for a sexual indiscretion. But since we just said yours was a moral indiscretion, they should know that it was moral and not sexual. And I tried to explain that perhaps that was a pretty big leap to make, but it was still fresh in the game. We're 2 out, so I had to sell my house, sold it, and went to live with some family for a little while. All the while, the entire time I was emailing in, calling in, trying to make something make sense out of this and say, listen, I want to be restored. Like, I want there to be conflict resolution. There's got to be a way we can talk about this. People are getting the wrong idea about it. And no, people don't have the wrong idea about it. Well, later that spring, they were performing a musical that I had written, and I talked to children's music director, and she said, yeah, you can come to rehearsal. That's fine. So I came back to Texas after being gone for about a month and a half or 2, and I was sitting in a rehearsal, and a very kind person walked up and said, hey, I probably shouldn't be over here, but I just wanted to come over here and say hi. And I said, well, why shouldn't you be over here? And she said, well, moms talk. And I said, well, what are they talking about? And she said, well, they don't think that you're allowed on campus here because of what you did. And I said, well, what do they think that I did? And she kind of got embarrassed. She said, well, just want to let you know that, miss you, think of you, love you, said some nice things, which very sweet. But that all of a sudden I was like, oh goodness, what's going on? Well, God was working in my heart on being humble, on being doing everything that I needed to do. And so I didn't think that it would promote unity for me to be an active member of the choir and orchestra. But Stonebriar was still my church. It was where I was a member of. It was my spiritual community. And being a single guy in a large city, like, that was my family. That was my support network. So I continued to go. I went to Stonebriar en Espanol, trying to brush up on my Spanish, and had some very dear friends that served in there. I was approached by children's ministry, and they said, hey, we need someone to volunteer in our youth department, or for kids. Would you be willing to do this? And I said, yeah, perfect. It was an age group I absolutely love. It was an area of ministry that's kind of up my alley, kind of, be an MC, stand up in front and direct people to different sections of it. And so I started doing that, and was fun. Absolutely loved it. That age group of kids, they're just really great. Well, in the meantime, I had been regularly emailing and trying to get a hold of church leadership to say, what can we do to move on? What can we do for restoration? Without very much help. Things move very slowly at a large church. Well, a well-meaning individual who is a good friend of mine and also a member of the church was not happy with how the situation was handled. Took me out to lunch and asked if there was something he could do. I said, no, this is my little red wagon. For anyone who's from PCC, you'll recognize that statement. This is my little red wagon. I will ride it. I don't need anybody else riding it. You do what you need to because it's your church, but just know this situation is mine. I'm trying to work through this in a way that would serve the cause of Christ best. So he wrote in a letter, addressed it to everybody, and referenced my situation, plus whatever else he was doing. It was not received well. Up until then, things had been moving in a pretty good direction, like I was going to be able to talk with pastors there about what had happened. So the letter came in, and that was it. I was told my chances were ruined. They were done. I could no longer address the pastoral staff. One Sunday, I was a little bit in angst, and I wrote in an email. I addressed it to all the pastors, to the main pastor, to my boss, to everyone. And I did not start it out the wisest. I said, we are all acting like children and this needs to stop. Urgh. And then the rest of it, I tried to explain my heart that I was sad how this was happening. We were on teams. It was like we were on different teams, and I was so sad because we're not teams. We're siblings. We are family. And what happens when you're in family, if someone makes you mad, you reach out, you hug them tight. And I said, I'm a brother offended. Can we start the Matthew 18 process? I need that spiritual family. I've got issues in my life. Oh goodness, yeah, I've got lots of issues, but where do I go? Where do I go for help? To my church family? And I'm getting ousted. I got called up by the children's pastor, and he said, hey, a parent wrote in and said that they saw you up in front of the kids and they were not happy with it, and so you are no longer allowed to hold that position, volunteering with the kids. And he said, in fact, they've decided that you may attend Stonebriar, but you are no longer allowed to serve. And I was heartbroken at this point. Just it had been blown up, and I had been talking. I've met with several people, and some people wanted to know. They would ask or whatever, and I would explain, and they said, "Oh my goodness, I thought that was something else. I thought you had slept with someone. I thought you were involved in some horrific ordeal." And no, that wasn't it. I tweeted some coarse words, and some things that, of course, you wouldn't want. Understanding that the environment in which I worked was a rather coarse environment itself. Just the language that used around the office and everything was certainly not a fluffy, frilly white. None of that justifies what I wrote. Please understand that it's again, my measuring stick should have been the fruits of the Spirit and not what was acceptable in my surrounding areas. But in my mind, the bar was just kind of set low. So once I got told that I was no longer allowed to serve, I could just attend. Some other opportunities opened up. I needed income, and so I began playing for some other churches in the area. I ended up playing for 3 different churches on Sundays, and so I was not able to attend. But the entire time I emailed in. Well, my former boss wrote back after I sent in the email saying, what can we do? What can we do to get this? I even suggested a time to meet. Actually, I guess I should go back. The executive pastor again talked to me, and he said, you hurt your boss. You hurt him very deeply, and you need to apologize to him. And I said, okay, I can do that. So I made a meeting with him. We met at a coffee shop, and I said, listen, I'm sorry for this. I don't want this friendship to be ruined just because I said some stupid things. Will you forgive me? And he, in a sense, said yes, that he would forgive me. But other than, that's really the only communication that I've gotten from him since January, except for some other stuff. Won't go into that. Anyway, so that was tough. And then I went back and no, you can't talk to the pastors. So once I started playing for these other churches and I was no longer at Stonebriar full time, I was still emailing, still trying to meet with them. And I said, what can I do? And so my former boss said, if you want any chance of being restored to the church, you need to go into counseling. And I said, well, I'm seeing a counselor right now, Christian guide. Will that work? Nope, you need to see the church counselor. I said, okay. So I called up the church counselor and I said, let's meet. And so we did. We met weekly. I'm sorry, not weekly, monthly. I'd call him every month and say, hey, when are we meeting? What's going on? And I said, what do I need to do for restoration? Like, what else can I do? And I don't think I'm betraying any confidence when I say eventually he just said, I don't know. Like, there's nobody else you need to apologize to. And he was very kind. He was telling the pastors on a regular basis, Paul is ready for restoration. And the word from church leadership was, why? And that was kind of what we just got. Why? Eventually it was, well, we're not sure if he's sorry enough or apologetic enough, but basically it just came back to why. Why does he want to be restored? And at this point I said, I'm not looking for my job back. I want to be restored back into my church. Spiritually, I want to be healed. Let me be back with my family. Let me serve. I sang in the choir, played in the orchestra before I was on staff. At the meeting where I was getting fired, I even told them, look, this is still my church. It was my church before. It can be my church after. There are things in my life I do need to get right. And the thing is, as a church staff member, what's hard about it is if you do have things that you do need to take care of, where do you go? Because if you tell, the church counselor, well, that's a coworker and you could lose your job. So a lot of times spirituality, your spiritual health is in direct opposition to your income. So for my church workers, I feel you. Anyway, tried. I went down, made a meeting with someone down at Dallas Theological Seminary, because I thought, well, maybe if I had like my Paul and Philemon moment where someone could go talk to Onesimus, or someone could go talk to Philemon, meaning my head pastor at the church, someone could go talk to him on my behalf. And I went down, had the meeting, and I said, honestly, I don't know what to do. I'm in this moment where I'm seeking restoration and I'm being denied. And I said, typically, I think it's the church that seeks to restore people, and they say, no, stay away. I said, but I'm asking for restoration. I'm asking not just for restoration, but what do I do? What do I do to be worthy of this? I have apologized to everybody I can think to apologize to. I have gone through all the steps. I know how. Now I need you to tell me what your expectations are. And again, all I was getting was why. So the guy at DTS said, this is not the first situation that this has happened to. He said, I've spoken on someone else's behalf to your lead pastor, and my word back from him was, I don't want to hear about it. Coming from a church background, I get it. Churches tend to be very invested in their image. And so I said, well, what do I do? What is the biblical ramification? He laughed. He said, I don't know. It's not like you denied Christ 3 times. But I said, what do I do? I'm on the opposite side of this. I'm a church member that wants restoration. And the church, officially, church leadership is denying me that. And he just said, well, you're moving to Nashville. And when you move to Nashville, just let the church know that the door is open for restoration, but you can no longer seek it actively. And he said, I don't know what else to say. So that's what I've done. I've let them know that the door is open for restoration. If they want to seek it, I'm here. The sad part is, once I got fired, I started getting contacted by former coworkers, and a lot of them had been through this very same thing. Of course, I always just got an email saying, so-and-so is moving on to a new ministry, let's pray for them. And I was, my head was so in my silo of writing music, I never really thought to, okay, they're moving on to a new ministry, cool. And I found out that there was quite a graveyard of people in my church that had been fired for very dubious circumstances. And the more that I reached out, and some other people that were not involved in my church, they reached out and they said, "Hey, I want to share with you my church story." Even today, I've been getting a lot of private messages from people saying, "Let me share you my story. Let me share with you my story." And I began realizing this is so common in the church world, that people are, they sort of pour their life and soul into a church, and then all of a sudden they're just fired. And it's not that they're just fired, but it's like they get stepped on and kicked out, and sometimes over the dumbest things. And that, I just don't think that that's what it's supposed to be. Like, we are supposed to be a people of grace, a people of restoration, and to act like this, like, the hypocrisy of it makes it even worse, especially for an unbelieving world. And for people kind of in my situation, you've been in church a long time, and then this happens, and you go, all right, well, then what was this grace thing you were preaching on the whole time? Not to make any mean digs, but is grace something other than just a gimmick to sell a book? Like, is it really worth living out? So anyway, I guess before I went to Spain, the day I left for Spain, I got to meet with someone, and I said, what happens now? Like, I'm leaving, I'm done. I can't keep this up while I'm in Nashville. I've got a life and a career to live, but I want closure. I've never gotten to tell my choir people goodbye. I've never gotten to tell my orchestra people goodbye. I'm basically banned from the church. The pastors were forbidden to meet with me in groups. They could meet with me one or two at a time, but that was it. And that was all from the direction of church leadership. And I said, there's no way for me to get closure on this, and I want closure. I need closure. And that's when I found out that the word had come from the very top, that restoration for me was no longer to be discussed. It was no longer to be talked about. Again, I don't think I will ever know the true reason why that happened. I hope it wasn't just the tweets, in a sense. I have to think that there would be maybe something more. I don't know, because nobody will talk. And I know that for a year and a half, I have tried very hard to work towards restoration. I have reached out as much as I can to make it right. And it's just, it wasn't happening. So where it left now is, I guess my thought, my lesson, my fear going into new churches here is, I don't know why all of this happened. Like, was there something I could have done to not make it happen? And that's why I use the divorce analogy, because this is what I hear a lot of divorcees say. Was there something I could have done to help save this marriage? And that's what I'm thinking. Was there something I could have done? Was there something I could have said? Was there something that I should have seen coming into this? I'm not always the most, I don't notice things, I'm not always the most observant, but I get that, and I'm very willing to admit my mistakes when it happened, but no one would talk. So working over the gun shy is one thing that'll have to happen, and God will help, God will give strength, and he has already shown his love through just a lot of people. A lot of you have been really great in reaching out. As far as the church situation happens, I know that if I was part of a church, and my church was doing this, I would want to know, my time, my talents, and my tithe are being used to support this ministry. And, I would want to know what was happening. I really hope that if I found out a church I was a part of was involved in activity like this, that I would go approach leadership and say, hey, this is not right. Or, we need to make this right. We need to keep this in the open. When you cover it up, it just, sin covered up sprouts, it grows. Let's at least get to the truth of the matter. Can we do unity? And in all of this, I've been trying to keep unity in the church, which is why I've not said anything or done anything public. I did not want to sow discord among my church. But on the other side of it, when I started meeting with the other people that had gotten fired from Stonebriar, all of them harbor a certain bit of bitterness, and that's what they have to deal with. And the thing was, I didn't know what happened to them. I didn't ask. Like I said, my head was so buried in the office, I never sort of looked out and realized what was going on. I hope that I would have spoken up had I known, but I'm not sure that I would have at the time. And, that's a question for later. But now, as far as church goes, churches can make mistakes too. Just because you're a pastor doesn't mean you're perfect. I get that. But how powerful of a message to say, listen, we made a mistake and we're trying to make it right. I know as a Christian and a church member, I would love for a church to admit a wrongdoing and ask for forgiveness. That would make me feel like that was a ministry worth being part of. Like, they're powerful. And so that's why I don't know what it will take. I have no idea. God is powerful. He has melted hearts of stone before. I will, like I said, the door is always open. I have not deleted anybody's phone number. I haven't blocked anything. I'm easily approached, and nothing would give me greater pleasure than to hug Don and Chuck and Charlton, to hug them tight and say, I forgive you. We're siblings in Christ, and that's, that's what we do. We mess up, and that's okay. I messed up. It wasn't like I was perfect, and it's possible I was doing something I didn't even know. I miss my family there, and all of the friends that I had made, and it's kind of hard when you make friends and you think they're friends, and they're not. Now I sound like a 12-year-old girl's Instagram post. But yeah, I don't know. How do you deal with it? How do you process all of this? It's not that I don't feel loved by the people. There's no way I could ever complain about that. And it's not that God isn't good. He's good, and he gives grace. And I get it. Yes, I'll be a better person and refining process and blah, 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 Christianese. But in the end, there were some people that I was very close to in church leadership, and a group of people that I had invested a lot of my soul in. I don't think that people quite understand when you're a musician or an artist or anything. Every time you play your violin, every time you write a piece of music, you sing a song, you play the piano, you are offering up a bit of your soul. And so when you give someone a piece of your soul and they stamp it on the ground, it hurts. Like, it's a part of you that you will never get back. It's like a kid offering a little drawing to the parent, and the parent crumpling it up and saying, it's not good enough. You should have worked on your chiaroscuro shading. And I guess I just want to know, I just want to know what was it about what I did that made the 7 years of music writing, of everything, what made that useless to you? Um, I honestly want to ask my boss, was I ever more than just a pretty handbag that made the church look sparkly? Did I ever mean more than that? Um, and if so, where's the where's the conversation? Um, I think in the end, even the prodigal son got a hug from the father, and I don't know. I had a meeting with Chuck. I got one shortly after the musical. He said it was really good. It was the best thing he'd ever heard, and that won me enough goodwill to have a meeting with him. And I just told him, I said, why am I getting thrown out? Like I'm I'm not understanding. And the only answer I really got back was, well, you should have had a mentor. And it was all sort of what I should have done coming into it, but there was nothing going forward. Um, so yeah, that's my story. I think that I can hold my head high. I have done everything I can think of. I've apologized to who I can apologize to. I have met with people tirelessly for the last year and a half. I have let them know that I would like to start the Matthew 18 process, that I am a brother offended. And now all I can do is just pray. Just pray. Continue praying and hope that hearts will be softened and that ultimately the power of the gospel will prepare. I love all of you guys. You're so fantastic. Really, the support has been phenomenal, and yeah, I think God wanted me here in Nashville for some reason, and Lord knows I was not going to quit my job at Stonebriar. So um, perhaps part of it was just getting me willing to move elsewhere for new experiences. I will not doubt the goodness of God or His sovereignty, but I will grieve for the church and my brothers when we don't follow the teachings of Christ. So anyway, there's my story. I love you all, and I will keep updating, especially if the good happens.